And Jack, I just want to say thank you, my friend. This is so wonderful having a chance to be here. When I always learn when invitations come from Jack, there's only one right answer, and the answer is yes. And just let me know what time, and I'm there. But also, it's because you and this organization can continue to be so committed to progress and growth and making sure that our economy can see and benefit everybody. So bless you, my friend. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the invitation here this morning as well. Thank you. Thank you. And if I could have a personal point of privilege, can all my Marylanders either raise their hand or so they can be acknowledged? I see all the halos around each of your heads. And can all of my future Marylanders raise their hands? Which should be everybody else who's not yet a Marylander. This really is a big deal to me, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here because I'm a big believer that, yes, when we talk about the greater Washington region, that we have rivalries, and we have sports teams that we might not agree on. We have industries and economies that we will compete on. But the thing that I know is that nothing beats the power of this region when we choose to work together. That this region, that the greater Washington area, that all of our entrepreneurs, all of our systems, all of our education, the leadership that we have from the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofit sector, everywhere, that we have the collective energy and the collective genius to be able to make sure that there is no region in this country that should be able to compete with us. And so while I know there are times we are going to compete, and people have learned in Maryland I am very competitive, I also believe in partnership. And I believe that partnership produces progress, and nothing else ever will. And so I'm grateful to stand here on behalf of the close to 6.5 million people of the state of Maryland, saying we're not just thankful for your work, but we're deeply excited to be your partners to make sure that this region advances. So thank you so much for having me here as well. I know when I first came into office now about 22 months ago, I'd never run for office before in my life. I had no political background. I don't come from a political family. I laugh and say I had to convince members of my family to vote for me when I told them I was running for governor. I don't come from that background. My background was that I was a paratrooper and a veteran in the United States Army. My background was that I was in the world of finance, and then eventually, after working in finance for about 6 years, then I went on to start a business, had a successful exit in 2017, then I became the CEO of one of the largest poverty-fighting organizations in this country. I'm a data guy. That's my background. And when I came on board as the governor of Maryland, I told the people of my state that we were going to be thoughtful, aggressive, competitive, and also that we would make sure that we could build a state where we would find common ground and leave no one behind. And I know there's a lot of conversations about, what happens in, post-election, and what does that look like for our states, and what does it look like for our region? And I want to be very clear to all of my Marylanders and future Marylanders that we are going to be thoughtful, we are going to be aggressive, we are going to find common ground, and we're going to leave no one behind. Our posture does not change. And when I say that this is going to be Maryland's decade, and I mean that, and by the way, we actually have receipts to start showing that there's actually facts behind what we're saying. It's not a slogan. When we say this is going to be Maryland's decade, it's not because of who sits in other seats. It's because Maryland is just going to choose to move differently. We're going to choose to move faster. We're going to choose to find common ground. We're going to choose to work in partnership. We're going to choose to make what might seem like the tough decision, but we're going to show because it's time for tough decisions to be made. And that we do not have the luxury just to pull back. We do not have the luxury to retreat. We do not have the luxury to get in a fetal position. I have never done that my entire life, and I'm not going to start now. This becomes a time when we have to be intentional. And there's a few things that I'll speak about briefly when we talk about intentionality. What does intentionality actually mean? And it really comes down to choosing how we are going to invest. that in this moment we are going to invest in our growth industries and invest in a way that's showing that Maryland plans on being deliberate about not just where we're putting our capital, but what we expect the returns to be. That we are going to actually choose to invest in our state's largest city and making sure that Baltimore thrives, because you cannot tell me a single state in this country where the state is clicking on all cylinders and the state's largest city is not. That we've got to invest in Baltimore. And yes, as we're talking about the larger growth, we've got to make it easier for businesses to be able to come and stay in the state of Maryland and make it so that we can be a state that is not just good for businesses, but also good for workers. And in the state of Maryland, you are not going to have to choose, because we can and we will do both. And so when we're talking about industries, right, we look at the industries that we know that Maryland needs to take a real competitive lead and an advantage on. And it's frankly just simply because we are going to invest and leverage the assets that we already have in the state of Maryland. That Maryland is literally the home of NIST. Maryland is the home of the NSA. Maryland is the home of U.S. Cyber Command. Maryland is the home of U.S. Naval Academy. Maryland is the home of so many federal institutions and bases. Maryland is the home of APL. Maryland is the home of like every single acronym in the world exists in the state of Maryland. And so considering those assets, why is it that when you look at our balance sheet, it doesn't reflect that we have those assets that actually exist in our state? So when we talk about in this moment that we are going to invest in things like life sciences and data science and AI, that we are going to invest in information technology, and that includes things like cyber. Again, hence, why do you have these assets in your state if you're not planning on investing in them? That we are going to invest in aerospace and defense tech, because we know, again, that these are industries that are on pace to have measurements of growth and would have had measurements of growth regardless of how a presidential election went, so Maryland needs to be at the epicenter of the growth of those industries. And it means being intentional about it. That our economic growth cannot just simply be tied to an administration. Our economic growth needs to be tied to the assets that are tethered to the state and the things that we can control. And so you are going to see how our state is going to be very intentional about how we're going to invest and how we're going to use our balance sheet. If it makes sense, we will invest. If it does not, we won't. Because I do not know a business model in this entire country where the answer is invest in everything. Your businesses don't do that. So the state needs to be really thoughtful about how we're going to leverage assets to be able to create a real pathway. That we are going to be intentional about investing in our state's largest city. You know, and I know when I'd go around the state and I'd have people even on the campaign trail, I'd be out in Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore, and I'd talk about, we got to invest in Baltimore. You shouldn't say that. That's not going to win you votes here. And I tell people, it's like, and people say, of course you'd say that. You know, you're from Baltimore, you're a homer. I was like, I don't say that because I'm a homer. I say it because I'm very good at math. It's our largest city. And so when we came in, we said we were going to be deliberate about how we were going to invest and protect the asset that is Baltimore. That we said, yes, we were going to make sure that we would lock in the Orioles for a 30-year deal, because I do not understand why we'd have a 2-year deal with one of the most storied franchises in sports, and not just because I love the Baltimore Orioles, and I do love the Baltimore Orioles, but it's because it is an asset that if you have a lack of predictability, guess what? No one will invest in an area if the core assets of that area are not locked in and stable. It's the reason that we've chosen to invest in things like the convention center. It's the reason we've chosen to invest in things like the Inner Harbor. That beautiful downtown Inner Harbor that we will restore, let's be clear, when we first came on board, the Inner Harbor was in receivership. Not anymore. That we were going to invest in Preakness and horse racing and making sure that the second leg of the Triple Crown is and will always be in Baltimore, but it's not just about the industry, it's also about how we're investing in the area that exists around the horse track as well, that we would create winners on the track and off the track. And what have been the results? That in just our first 22 months, Baltimore now is one of the fastest growing economies inside of the entire region. The homicide rate in Baltimore, while we went 8 straight years of 300 plus homicides in the city of Baltimore unabated, in our first year, we broke the back of 300. This year, we're about to break the back of 200. Baltimore has had the fastest drop in homicides. And the last time the homicide rate was this low in Baltimore City, I was not born yet. You got to invest. And we've got to make sure that we are investing in our assets and using government smartly. And that includes making it easier for businesses to grow. You know, when I first came on board, I had people who were like, it's difficult to grow a business in Maryland. And I'm like, I had to do one, I know, like, I get it. And they're right. So how can we make it simpler? And it's the reason that our administration came on board and said we are going to spend our first sessions focusing on things like permitting and regulatory reform and making it easier for businesses to get permits in the state of Maryland. It should never take a business 3 years to get a permit in my state. That we were going to invest in critical infrastructure and make it easier for growing industries to be able to grow and thrive in the state of Maryland. And yes, you could invest in things like data centers and also make sure that you had environmental protections that were met. It's not a binary choice. That we were going to invest in growth industry and getting our entrepreneurs the capital and the liquidity that they need. Because we know that if you want to be able to attract businesses and attract talent, and making it easier for large businesses to be able to come on board, which then also make it easier for small businesses the capital that they need in order to thrive and succeed in that kind of ecosystem. We knew we had work to do. And we knew we had to bring everybody involved in order for that work to take place. And the results are showing, the green shoots are presenting themselves, and the data doesn't lie. That when I was first inaugurated as governor, we were ranked 43rd in the country in unemployment. Now, because we've decided to do things like invest in childcare, because no one should have to choose between, are my children going to be okay or can I get back into the workforce? That we've been able to make Maryland the first state in this country that now has a service year option for all of our high school graduates. So all of our high school graduates now have a chance to work in the private sector, in the public sector, work for agencies, to make them find the thing that makes their heart beat a little bit faster, and they now have a paid opportunity to be part of an economy and part of a growth system that will support them, not just for now, but also give them a pathway for their future. That we've been able to make sure we're investing in apprenticeship and trade programs. Because I'm a big believer in our 4-year colleges and universities. Maryland has the highest educated population in this country. Maryland has the highest percentage of people with clearances and TS clearances in America. But I also want to be clear. Not everybody needs to attend a 4-year college in order to be economically successful. And in Maryland, we are going to end that lie. And so while we were ranked 43rd in the country in unemployment, when we first came on board, we are now going to, and I look at these numbers all the time, we are now going on to our 13th straight month with Maryland having amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, and we are just getting started. My point is this: Maryland is moving. Maryland is growing. Maryland's going to be aggressive. Maryland's going to make sure that we can have an ecosystem where the business community can thrive, where Maryland can be the best place in the world to change the world, and that we know that our workers and our families are also going to get what they need in order to grow and exist too. And we're not going to choose. But the thing that we know is that we're not going to do it alone. It's going to happen because we're working in partnership with each and every one of you. It's going to happen because this room is going to help make it so. And I'm so proud that our state can not just be a partner with you in this, but that our state can really, truly be an example of what happens when people choose to do something really wild, work together, and the kind of progress that we can see for all 6.5 million people and all of you future Marylanders who call our state home. I'm deeply grateful for each of you. I'm thankful for your work. I'm thankful for your commitment and your vision. And I'm thankful that we all, every single day, choose to do what I learned in the Army when I was 17 years old, to leave no one behind. God bless you guys, and thank you for all you continue to do.